We now head into looking at Plato's famous line and his even more famous Allegory of the Cave. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, the original, you've seen the Allegory of the Cave. Also, of course, in part, Descartes' problem with the external world, and a lot packed into that movie. But to Plato's line, the Allegory of the Cave. Plato begins his discussion by dividing up lovers of opinion and lovers of wisdom. Philosophers are, by definition, lovers of wisdom. And so for Plato, the true philosophers are lovers of the vision of truth. Then he heads into talking a bit about his idea of the forms, speaking of the one and the many, using beauty and ugliness. And he says, since beauty is the opposite of ugliness, they are two. So far so good. And of course, being two, each is one. So what is his point here? Well, he generalizes this to all qualities, and they're seemingly opposites. So the same would hold true of the just and the unjust. They're two, but each of them is one. Good and evil, well, they're two, and each is one. So taken singly, each is one. And he claims from combinations of them with actions, things, and each other, they appear to be many. And that's why, according to Plato, there is this appearance of the many. And as you might recall from earlier, for Plato there is a form of justice, there is a form of beauty, and there is some debate if there are negative forms, like a form of injustice, forms of evil, forms of ugliness. One option is, of course, to say that there are no such forms because they're the lack of positive qualities. But another option is to accept them. Now, Plato, in addition to the lovers of wisdom, there are also those he calls the lovers of sounds and sights, who are fond of tones, colors, forms, not the Platonic forms, and artificial products made from them. And he claims the reason they are but lovers of sights and sounds is their minds cannot see or love absolute beauty. And he asserts that one's life is a dream, who believes in beautiful things, but does not believe in absolute beauty. And asleep or awake, it is dreamlike to mistake the image for the real thing. So continuing his metaphor of dreaming and being awake, he says that one is awake who recognizes the existence of absolute beauty and can distinguish the idea, or rather the form, from the objects which participate in that form. And a person is awake who does not put the objects in the place of the form, nor the form in the place of the objects. And the mind of one who has knowledge, and the mind of the other has opinion. So the lovers of wisdom have knowledge, the lovers of sights and sounds have mere opinion, at least according to Plato. So how does he ground this distinction? Well, as you might imagine, he's got lots of arguments to do this. The first one is the being and non-being argument for this distinction between knowledge and opinion, between those who are lovers of wisdom and those who are lovers of sights and sounds. So this argument goes as follows. One who has knowledge knows something. And according to Plato, absolute being may be absolutely known, but the utterly non-existent is utterly unknown. And so he's sort of connecting his metaphysics to his epistemology. So absolute being, which has absolute metaphysical being, also has absolute epistemic, qualities. It can be absolutely known. And something that doesn't exist at all would be utterly unknown. Now, in between the two, something that can be and not be will be between pure being and absolute negation of being. And so Plato draws the obvious correspondences. Knowledge for him corresponds to this being, and ignorance corresponds to not being. And so he thinks that he's divided stuff up. And then he presses on to his next argument, what could be called the spheres and faculties argument for his distinction. So for him, faculties, which would include things like the senses, sight and hearing, are powers in us by which we do as we do. For example, sight allows us to see. Hearing obviously allows us to hear. And he claims that what is the same sphere and same result would be the same faculty, and what is another sphere, another result is different. For example, what separates sight and hearing is they have different results, because with sight, you see visible things. With hearing, you hear audible things. So you don't see sound or hear colors, typically. Now, he takes knowledge and opinion to both be faculties, but he contends they're not the same. Why? Well, because of the different spheres. Knowledge and opinion have distinct powers in distinct spheres, distinct subject matter. And for him, being is a sphere of knowledge, and knowledge is to know the nature of being. Opinion is, of course, to have an opinion. And so if we follow his reasoning, if difference in faculty implies a difference in the sphere, and if opinion and knowledge are distinct faculties, then the sphere of knowledge and the sphere of opinion cannot be the same. And so that is what he would claim. So because of those distinct spheres, they are different. So he can, in this case, that they would be both faculties, but not the same. So he presses on with more about opinion and knowledge. So opinion for him is going to be an intermediate. Ignorance correlates to not being, being correlates to knowledge, and opinion is not concerned with absolute being and not concerned with absolute not being. So opinion is neither ignorance nor knowledge. The obvious place to put it, of course, is as an intermediate. So what it correlates to is and is not at the same time, and is between pure being and absolute not being. Now this may seem like a bit of a paradox. It is and is not. But for Plato, again, there are these very distinct levels of reality. There would be absolutely real, the forms. There'd be absolute nothing, which would be nothing. And then in between are varying degrees. So particulars both are and are not. Not in a paradoxical way, but in kind of a weird metaphysical way. So the corresponding faculty would not be knowledge, nor ignorance, but opinion. So what then is the object of opinion? Well, he's kind of laid it out here. The beautiful in this world of particulars will be seen by some as ugly, and the same for all the other qualities. What one person sees as just, others will see as unjust. What some see as good, others will see as bad. And beauty provides a pretty good example, because people do disagree about what is beautiful. Someone will say, "Oh, that's really a beautiful painting." Other people will say, "No, that's pretty not beautiful." And so the ideas of the many, the multitude, about the beautiful in all things, he claims are halfway between pure being and pure not being. So this is all matter of opinion, not knowledge. So, those who have opinion but do not have knowledge see the many beautiful things. They see, they can go, use a modern illustration, they can go on Instagram and see all the, beautiful images, but they don't see absolute beauty. They see the many just, but they do not see absolute justice. And the same for all things, because they are lovers of opinion rather than lovers of wisdom. And those who see the absolute, the eternal and immutable, have knowledge and not merely opinion. Those who love the truth are lovers of wisdom and not lovers of opinion, as Plato sees it. Next, we'll head on to considering more about the objects of knowledge.